All right. Hey, everybody. Happy 22nd of April. Gosh. Oh, it's good to see Adam in his summer attire, even though it feels like it's feels like it's Cleveland out there. Not quite. They had 6 inches of snow the other night. I got a photo from a workout buddy that said, who's from Cleveland originally. He got this from one of his buddies in Chagrin Falls. And I'm like, oh man, I'll deal with pollen over that any day. Oh my goodness. Well, hey, we've got some good stuff to talk about. I am wearing the 13 Colonies shirt today because it looks like North Carolina is going to conform to the rest of their brethren if in regards to PPP forgiveness or the deductibility of the expenses. So anyway, we'll talk about that too. And Mike has already sent us a pretty in-depth word problem. I've already shared it with Jack and Adam so they could have it in front of them, because there is no way, I don't care how good their photographic memory is or just their auditory memory is, they're not gonna be able to follow this without it in front of them. So before we launch into that, Jack, I know you have been doing some due diligence, and why don't you bring us up to speed first on North Carolina? So anybody outside of North Carolina, sorry, but this has been a big deal for us. Can you deal with that first?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, and it relates to what's going on in the House and with the Senate with respect to conforming, and they call it a temporary alignment of PPP treatment to federal treatment, with respect to having both the income of the money that you received as not being taxable, but because it is used as a substitute replacement for expenses that you would already have and that would be deductible. It is the deductibility of those expenses. And so last week we reported that there was it was in the House and it was being read, and that on Tuesday, so 2 days ago, that there was supposed to be the second reading, which is the next step in getting it out of the House and into the Senate. And as far as I can tell, that did happen on Tuesday, and it is on its way to the Senate. And if you, on the North Carolina General Assembly website, if you look, the Senate bill, the House bill is 334, the Senate bill is 112. On the Senate side of things, there hasn't been an update, so it's probably literally and figuratively in transit to the Senate to be put back on their calendar for consideration. So hopefully that comes into compliance relatively soon. And so, but there's still no definitive word on it getting through the Senate. There is positions on both sides of things, and there's also positions as to whether or not all of it should be deductible, partial deductions, and those kind of things. So there's all kinds of calculations and machinations that may occur in the Senate, and they will take some time to go through their process and likely not just put it through the door immediately. An example of that is even in the House, they had moved forward and then they took a step back to make some amendments to it and then go forward again. I didn't look deep into see what those amendments were, but there was a little bit of a hiccup. And so that's where we're at with that in particular topic.
I just want to know the one person out of the 115 that voted no for it. I just want to know who that is. I see no reason why anybody would vote no for that.
Yeah, I can find that. It's a public record, so I'll see.
I'm not into canceling somebody else or shaming him, but I just like to know from my own. Hopefully, he's not from my district or she. Adam.
Yeah, if you guys didn't know, it's Magnum PI week.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. It's not Magnum PI week, but that'd be funny. There should be a Magnum PI week.
Can we make a motion for that?
Yeah, as I was looking for a shirt today, I decided, you know what, this would be a fun shirt to wear today. I'm gonna wear that shirt. Anyway, probably the biggest stuff that we've seen this week, in addition to what Jack was talking about in terms of still having questions about the Senate bill. I did hear on NPR this morning that the House has started lobbing grenades over at the Senate, saying, "Hey, what's the holdup?" So it's the Senate could probably lob a grenade back, saying, "Hey, it took you guys a while to take it up in the first place after we got it to a first reading in February." But you think, wow, way to run the clock out on this one until May 17th. But I think a lot of the stuff that I've seen this week still has to do with the employee retention tax credit. And excuse me, it's funny. It really falls into two categories. Category number one would be, hey, if we want to qualify for relief as we go, there is a way that you can get the credit refunded to you instead of waiting. Some payroll companies are working with companies to do this. Others are saying, hey, we're still waiting for guidance. The ones that are waiting for guidance, my assumption on that, I haven't talked to anyone, but my assumption on that is that, what they don't want to have happen is that you got a refund that you weren't entitled to. And they otherwise, through maybe no fault of your own, but they otherwise are obligated to try to figure out how to get the money back to you since they're acting as a trust on your behalf. I think that's probably why there's a little bit of hesitation to get super aggressive in that department with the payroll providers. But the other thing that we've seen a lot of with the employee retention tax credit, despite our fabulous communication methods, Gary, we're still getting clients that forward us these solicitation advertisements around, hey, let us come in and, go get this credit for you. And they're super aggressive. I even got a solicitation for an employee retention tax credit because they said, hey, don't refer that work out to the CPAs. We can do that work for you. I'm like,
it's called know your audience.
Yeah. So you want, evidently, they're not watching the webinars. So the people that have forwarded the clients we've had that have forwarded this to us that haven't been reading our email broadcasts or listening to webinars, unfortunately, I do chastise them a little bit, but I think they're not, everybody just needs to remember to pay attention to the basics. If you're going to go backwards, you needed to have had a quarter-on-quarter gross receipts decline of greater than 50%. If it's a 2020 vintage credit, it's going to be a 2021 credit. It's a quarter-on-quarter decline of greater than 20%. If you're not that, then you're out of luck, with one exception, which kind of bleeds into the question that got preceded, which is, the only other way that you qualify if you didn't have a the significant decline in gross receipts is if you were considered essential, but were effectively shut down due to government order. And there's all sorts of, speculation on what this actually means. The IRS goes through a couple different examples, but what's pretty clear out of this is, the examples that I like that the IRS has published that, might be relevant for the purpose of this call, because, the facts and circumstances are going to, kind of dictate which category you fall in, which my take on it would be, I think that's going to, at the end of the day, if this goes back to, hey, I have to testify in front of a court, this is going to end up being a very narrow scope of people that would qualify that didn't have the gross receipts reduction, but did consider themselves shut down due to government order. So, an example that they used is, retail, limited capacity, can only let, 5 people in at a time. Customers are inconvenienced. If I'm the retailer, I could probably make the case that, look, people were pissed off about having to wait in line. And the fact that the government told them that they probably shouldn't travel unless it was absolutely necessary was in effect a government order. But the IRS does not interpret it that way. The IRS would say, no, you were not shut down. It's just your customers were inconvenienced. Another example that they use is a research and development company that has a lab function and then also has a software function. Software function can still work. Lab function cannot work because the lab has to be in a physical location. Physical location was shut down because there was a shelter-in-place order. In that case, that is considered shut down because the lab was shut down. The people couldn't actually go to physical location. Had it just been a pure software company, though, that had to do a shelter in place, but the people could still telework, that doesn't count because the people could still telework. So this isn't, another one, hey, you're considered essential, you can still work, but your customers can't. Not considered shut down. I can't really tell you why. I remember the Jack and Adam don't make the rules. So I think our guidance on that is that, look, if it was me, keeping in mind that you're getting this advice for free and the guy giving it is wearing a Magnum PI shirt, if there was any sort of kind of little bit of gray area on my revenue recognition rules, I'd be going there first before I'd be trying to, jump the shark on, trying to stretch my way into an essential, what's considered essential, what's considered a shutdown business, especially in the state of North Carolina, because we were so limited in terms of the amount of time on the shelter-in-place order that we had. That I don't know. That one's going to be tough. That one's going to be pretty tough. I'd go after the revenue recognition. Dig in and don't give up. But I'd be going after the revenue recognition first.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and read some of the story problem just for the people on the call, as well as Mike. I told you we'd deal with it. And I think we've dealt with it probably at a high level. But here's the scenario. He didn't think that they had a 50%. They were close to the 50% reduction in revenues for any quarter, but they weren't quite there. And so it seems like they met the partial government shutdown because there was a question on this IRS publication, question number 11. If a governmental order requires non-essential businesses to suspend operations, pardon me, but allows essential businesses to continue operations, is an essential business considered to have a full or partial suspension of operations due to governmental order? Here are the excerpts from the answer that seem to apply to us. Any employer that operates an essential business may be considered to have a partial suspension of operations if more than a nominal portion of its business operations are suspended by a governmental order. For example, an essential business is permitted to continue its operations, may nonetheless be considered to have a partial suspension of its operations if a governmental order requires the business to close for a period of time during normal working hours solely for the purpose of this employee retention credit. A portion of the employer's business operations will be deemed to constitute more than a nominal portion of its business if either the gross receipts from that portion of the business is not less than 10% of the gross receipts, both determined by the gross receipts of the same quarter, calendar quarter in 2019, or in 2020, the North Carolina stay-at-home order required employees to stay at home, not come into work unless they are essential. Some of our operations could be done through remote work. However, we have a portion of our business that involves assembly, integration, test, and integration. This portion of our business is greater than 10% of the business and requires people in the office to perform it. For several months in 2020, we could not keep this portion of the business open during entire normal working hours. So I know that's very detailed. And Jack, I think you had a thought on that too, that we wanted to, bottom line is we wanted to address this at a high level, but there's probably some deeper digging.
Yeah, Adam, do you want to go first and answer
Yeah.
the question? Yeah, and I'll jump in.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back into the examples that they use, because you can read anything in the definition, but when they go into the specific examples, I think it provides a little bit more clarity. So again, a restaurant considered essential, still has sales, still may not be down from a gross, greater than 50% from a gross receipts test. I mean, that could be a common occurrence in the restaurant business. But it does qualify, because if the order read nobody can go inside, it's outdoor dining only, you by government order, you limited the capacity to do something within that business. So it really, it's really something that needs to follow that, in my opinion, it really needs to follow kind of that fact pattern, because they even go into, like manufacturing operations, if you have to, implement social distancing, that's not considered a disruption enough to qualify for this credit. So as I said, I think it's got to be, if you're gonna stake the flag on, hey, I was disrupted, I think it's got to be a fact pattern that is pretty much as clear as the restaurant, the restaurant business. I think the other thing that you got to be careful of here too is that, remember when they first wrote these regulations, it was around, it was around the same time that they were saying that, the employee retention tax credit did not qualify for PPP funds. Like if you got PPP, you can't take ERTC. Then they went back and said, nope, actually you can. Well, the shelter in place rules were right around this. This is my other thing about, hey, just, be cautious. The shelter in place rules were written right at the same time that people were also receiving PPP funds. So, presumably, that's the quarter that, you're claiming, then you get back up to your 80% normal operations and get restored, or, you try to keep on claiming it due to, some sort of, partial shutdown, that kind of key window that first triggered you to then say, I qualify because of the shutdown, got lifted. So, and it's a period when you didn't need the money. So, I think what there has not been guidance on is, and I may not be making sense here. So Gary, you may need to make sure that I'm keeping this Barney style, but where I think this essential business thing, my own opinion is that's really targeted to people that couldn't get PPP funds, or didn't get PPP funds for whatever reason. Because if you kind of think about it, they're saying either you had a revenue reduction. That's crystal clear. You had a revenue reduction. Doesn't matter. Game's over. You get the credit. Or we shut your ass down. And you couldn't work. But even then, we're going to be real laser-like in terms of the shut you down. Well, the shutdown for most businesses, with the exception of restaurants, strip clubs, was a pretty limited window that happened to have also overlapped with PPP funds. So I'm normally aggressive person. This one just feels like it's going to be pretty tough, given the window of when North Carolina had its shelter in place laws in effect. I mean, the other thing to think about this too is that if you're on life support right now from a cash flow perspective, absolutely you should do something about this. At the same time, generally with refunds, your statute of limitations is 3 years. So if you're not going to die because you don't receive the money tomorrow, if I'm taking that path, I was an essential business that got shut down or partially shut down, that's sort of like a, hey, I want a formal, legal opinion on this, because presumably if you didn't meet the 50%, then you may or may not be on life support. I don't know, but it just feels like one of those things where there, I wouldn't want to be the first one that had to challenge that one. I would want maybe a little bit more precedence to get established before me, since it is such a it is such a vague area that, the examples, not to play a lawyer, but while I'm doing it, yeah, I remember an old girlfriend of mine was taking the LSAT, and she started reading legal problems on the LSAT to me, and I would answer the question, and the answer was always the opposite of exactly how I answered it, because I answered it with common sense. I did not answer it with the law. So I think even in the examples that they use on this particular topic, if you had asked me before seeing what they said didn't qualify, oh yeah, that qualifies. Oh yeah, that qualifies too. Of course that qualifies. And half of them do, half of them don't. That I would have picked that would have said qualified, just based on how they laid out the guidance.
And I would say to supplement that is that, and Mike, this because you provided this to us, but there is a 102-page notice. It's notice 2021-20, so 2021-20, and it goes through, and that's what Adam's referring to as far as the examples go. And so, it's a complex decision tree in the sense that you start out with essential, non-essential business, and then it's like, okay, partial, not partial, how much, the impact, was this the cause of the shutdown? Was it because of the governmental order? Is it because people are choosing not to come to your business, and that's why you have the reduction in employment or the partial shutdown? Or is it because of truly prohibited, like lesser operational hours or other restrictions? So it's a very complex decision tree. And even if you were to go through, and there are, what I thought was interesting in this notice is that they give you 17, 16 pages of information, and then they say part 3 guidance, and they go through, it looks like maybe 12 different subsections, giving you examples, questions, examples about eligible employers, aggregation rules, and then some of the more interesting and pertinent information, full or partial suspension of trade or business operations. So they give you some examples, but as Adam was saying, you can't necessarily put yourself into those examples necessarily. So I would say your best course of action is to take those examples and try to fit within the different examples and parameters and see where that shakes out. But I'm not aware of anyone that has gotten to a point where they said, well, no, this is wrong. That's pushback as to what's right or wrong, or examples. So at this point, all of us are essentially beta testers as to what is going to be acceptable and not acceptable as being a partial, complete shutdown. What is the cause? What is the impact? Those kind of things. So right now, the best that we have is the best guess using this guidance. But I think that more will come out down the road, because it is, well, what about this? What about this scenario? And so as they be reactive to actual scenarios, as we saw with the other guidance that came out, they started out with a handful of questions and responses, and they built onto that. I think we'll see some more bolting onto responses and examples of what is in and what is out. And same thing with me is that, some things are like, okay, really, is that why wouldn't that count? It just, so more of a fairness argument versus what is being interpreted as the law in its current stance and its current reading, which is also another topic, which is that the evolution of the law to be reactive to reality, so that it fits in the purposes of all of this, which is to put more money in people's pockets through employers, and and obviously helping small businesses, other businesses survive and get through this. So.
Well, Mike, hopefully that helps. I mean, you're getting what you paid for. This was free. and you do have a real lawyer, and you also have a guy that has answered questions on the LSAT and gotten them all wrong. So take that for what it is. So anyway, any other questions out there?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, not to belabor the point, but if you kind of go back to the other part of the question, which was the 10% receipts test, I mean, or the 10% hours test, I mean, it kind of, it implies that, you have that granularity of data available. So like, so what that exception is, hey, I got shut down and I had a more than nominal, IRS defined nominal is 10%, shut down in one of my operations. And another example that I've seen is the example of a hospital. A hospital absolutely required to stay open, but elective surgeries got shut down, on the assumption that you can delineate the revenue associated with elective surgeries as a segment relative to the overall total, and that's greater than 10%, that shutdown caused you to be greater than 10%, you got a case. If you're a manufacturing operation, that's working, 3 shifts and in normal times, relative and this is all compared back to 2019, in normal times, and you were, required, you could only be open from 8 to 5. I don't think anybody had that kind of order, but it's a good example. Well, then your hours were down. That's really the only way you can get this dog. I think to get this dog to hunt is you got to be able to prove that you have like a clearly defined revenue segment that you've been tracking that you can compare back to 2019 on to shut down. And the test is either couldn't work hours or you had a loss in revenue. So as I said, it's a lollapalooza.
And if I could,
go ahead. Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I was going to say, is kind of an adjunct discussion to, we're kind of talking about, good behavior, bad behavior, inadvertent behavior, what is right, what is wrong, just to give some statistics on this, because, you read some things and it's like, okay, they're coming after you, the IRS, police are coming after you. And so just to give you a little bit of context as to, and we've talked about this, they're really going after the low hanging fruit, but to give you some context of it. So an article that I read recently, and I have it up, and I assume that the sample pool is this 209 individuals in 119 cases that the Justice Department brought criminal charges against in relation to PPP fraud since they began processing applications back in April of 2020. And so some of the numbers that they shared is to show you that they're really focusing on the really bad behavior, which is 107 cases accused the individuals of falsifying payroll documentation to justify getting the loan or getting a bigger loan. 93 cases created fake tax documents used for verifying details in loan applications. 41 cases allegedly created bogus companies to get loans. 28 cases using defunct companies to get loans. 20 cases using stolen identities or aliases. 12 cases falsifying ownership of existing legitimate businesses. 28 cases accused individuals of obtaining EIDL loans and fraudulently obtaining those. And so being proactive, there was an article that I found on a government website as to how do you prepare yourself to mitigate the risk of, if you have any questions, or you just to be ready for that potential audit, whether it's random. And I even though I don't think they have the capacity to do random audits, they need to look for the fire and the smoke, the obvious ones. Some suggestions are, as we said, just to reiterate, record supporting company's determination that the loan is necessary to support the company's ongoing business. All emails and communications with the lenders. So in my world, in most cases, phone calls never happen. And because it's he said, she said, unless it's recorded, and then you have wiretapping issues potentially with a non-consenting individual. So always operate, you want things in writing and be able to prove and produce that writing, and records that show how you use the money, specifically what you used it for. monitor the corporate spending of these loans so that if you have others that are empowered to spend money, make sure you're watching over them if you're not the only one that is looking at the expenditures. And then treat your PPP loan like a government contract, because it is. So, you know, it's, if you have had the pleasure of dealing with government contracts, you know that there are pathways and lines that you have to follow, and the penalties for doing so or not doing so can be pretty significant. So just some proactive thoughts that I thought I would share with you, because we've talked about the what ifs and are they going to come after me? Well, you know, if nothing else, this may help ease your guilty conscience, even if it shouldn't be guilty because you didn't do anything wrong, at least purposefully not do anything wrongly. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there for everybody.
So if you are a client of ours or you are on our distribution list, one of the things that we sent out earlier this week had to do with a bill, or it's actually a bipartisan effort being introduced into Congress that would offer some emergency pandemic relief to the country's tiniest employers. So that includes self-employed ranchers, small ranchers, farmers, et cetera. It's not adding more money into it, and it's not extending it, but it allows them to apply for more money. So if you got that from us and didn't click on the link, I would encourage you to do that. It's a hot link that says a bipartisan effort. And what I've experienced is about 3 out of 4 times that you click it, the Senate gives you some sort of an error message. And then on the 4th time, eureka, you get in and you can read it. Do you have anything that you would want to expand on that? Because I don't know that it's necessarily gone through yet, Adam.
No. And again, I kind of come back to, I keep on wondering how they're going to administer all this. So, yeah. So no, I don't have anything to add.
Do you guys have any updates on timing on official launch of Restaurant Revitalization Fund?
I don't have anything new other than the advisory that was just sent out that, you know, they'll pilot it and then they'll do a wide deployment. So that leads me to think that it's probably not going to be until early to middle May.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I lost my unmute button. So read an article, I think it was in the New York Times, that talked about that now that PPP is kind of winding down, they are focusing on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which, to refresh everyone's recollection, $28.6 billion support program for bars, restaurants, and food trucks. And then also on the venue, let's see, I think that was 16 billion for live event businesses, but obviously I think more pertinent to this group is probably the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So let's see, within the next 2 weeks, it will begin a 7-day test intended to help the agency avoid the kind of technical fiasco that plagued the venue program, the prior, you know, because the shuttered venue, they started that and then they had to kind of shut it down. And they're trying to make sure that the Restaurant Revitalization Fund implementation doesn't have as many problems. So that's the latest on those 2 things.
I'm surprised that it's taken this long for us to get a question about this, but Cindy, I hear you. And so I'm going to read this to the guys. So they offer a small $50 bonus for employees that receive full vaccinations. For the credit now available for part-time employees who take the vaccinations, would the bonus they offer also be part of that credit?
You know, I'm going to have to plead ignorance, other than seeing that there is a credit that's going to be proposed for people that offer time off for vaccinations. I don't know the details of what's actually going to happen with it. And I say that to say that you know, I wasn't aware that the president could just say, thou shalt offer credit. So when it said Biden going to give small businesses a credit for, blah, 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 I sort of thought that still had to get through Congress, but I could be mistaken. So I had that on my to-do list that when I saw that to go do some further digging on. All right, well, that's interesting. Need to figure that out before I file the next tax return.
Yeah, and I think you have fundamental issues with that kind of program, which is, is somebody who has to make a financial decision that maybe doesn't want to take the vaccine, and but in financial dire straits, and so what is the lesser of the two evils? Well, I'm going to sacrifice what I believe, which is I don't want to take it for whatever reason. Maybe it's religious, maybe it's medical, whatever it may be, but I have to do it. So I think it would be viewed by some as a potential bullying, maybe into doing something that you might not otherwise want to do if you had free choice. So it's basically manipulative under duress, essentially. So, and we can talk about, and the three of us have been talking about vaccine passports and other stuff. So we can dive into that a little bit as well if you want to.
Yeah. So let me come back to the tax credit question. So I was mistaken. I had the opportunity to pull a Jack. I looked it up and said I got my research done.
Wow, you're getting fast.
Yeah. So basically, if you've got fewer than 500 employees, which so it's going to be smaller companies, you can get a credit for up to $511 per day for the time off that you give to employees for each worker through September. So that was actually part of the pandemic legislation. So it's already passed. This is just the dollar value and the implementation of it. So the way that I probably would view that specific question is, hey, you're giving people $50 to go get it. I think that you're going to get I think you're going to get, a max of 511 back, period, regardless of whether you paid them the $50 or not.
It'd be interesting to see if that, I think it's a matter of perspective too, based on what I just said, which is, okay, are you being reimbursed for the expense of basically giving someone paid leave? I mean, is it substitute kind of paid leave to be able to leave the premises during working hours to go get something, to go get the shot, versus saying, if you get the shot, here's a $50 check for being a good, vaccinated citizen of the company and of society, kind of thing. That's
and I mean, and the whole key here is you're supposed to be paying them too. So like, in other words, I can't say, hey Gary, I need you to go get that vaccine. So you want to use some of your PTO for that, please? But by the way, here's $50. It doesn't work that way. It has to be paid. Basically I have to say, Gary, I'm not having you take PTO. I'm still going to pay you. Then I can get the credit back.
All right, next question. Oh, yeah. So Cindy is clarifying they're giving the bonus in addition to the time. All right, cool.
Yeah. I think I don't think you can get $511 plus $50. I think it's just going to be the tax credit.
But you're getting a 10-to-1 return if you take the full 500 and whatever. So any other questions out there? So here's another question for the audience. So this is kind of interesting. So we've had 30 people on here without a whole lot of new stuff. We've gone into some depth on some specific scenarios, but here's a question for you guys that keep showing up for this. Besides seeing Adam in a Magnum PI t-shirt or shirt, which is always worth doing, what kind of questions do you guys have, or topics that you would want us to be answering? Because we're happy to do this. I mean, it seems like we've provided some value, hopefully. hopefully a little smile every once in a while too. But the bottom line is for it to be worth your time to dial into this thing on a weekly basis, what are the kind of topics that you think would be valuable, especially having Magnum PI and Jack on here? So hit us up on the chat or whatever. So here's the question, another question, guys. What's the name of this tax credit that you were just referencing, Adam?
So that's funny. I just shut down my browser. I don't know if it exactly has a name yet. It just says on the White House, www.whitehouse.gov. Fact sheet, President Biden to call on all employers to provide paid time off for employees to get vaccinated after meeting goal of 200 million shots in the first 100 days. We'll announce new tax credit to offset the cost for small businesses. So, he announced it on April 21st, but there's not a name for it yet. But it's basically just paid leave to go get vaccinated. And then as part of the credit that already existed in the first place, if you're experiencing symptoms and you let people take paid time off so I got the second dose. I had some cold sweats, but since I never actually had COVID, I'm good to go. That's why I can wear the shirt today, because I'm happy. Other members of the Boatsman family who had COVID and also got their second shot, down for the count, 3 days. I mean, literally like non-functional around this household. So, my kids actually, two of my kids missed school on Monday because of it. Had they been working, they would have missed work. So if they weren't required to take sick leave, those symptoms associated with the vaccine qualifies for the credit as well. I would assume that the administration of it will probably fall under the FMLA credit, which is technically called the FFCRA credit that was already in existence, but they haven't announced the details yet, other than the dollar amount.
I heard that the name is actually, it's an acronym, it's GRD, Get or Done.
Get or Done.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, Southern.
Yeah, good.
We use the acronym a lot in my house, so yeah.
Yeah, love it. There you go.
You lawyers are full of acronyms, man. You and the bankers.
Yeah.
Oh, and I have my obligatory, let's just go ahead and get it over with, dad joke.
Oh, no.
Okay. My doctor wrote that I had type A blood, but he was wrong. It was just a typo. That one's funny. Come on.
That's terrible.
Is bad, man. You're gonna drive all the people away with that.
Yeah.
That's why I waited until 44 minutes into the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Bob, thanks for responding to my question out there. I'd like to be able to ask your group other tax questions as they relate to C Corps, S Corps, individual tax entities, not necessarily today, but in the future. All right, cool.
Sure. Awesome.
You got the right
perfect
group here for that.
That's kind of where that's a little bit of where we're leaning. It's like, so I guess Jack and I's vision, I guess, would be that we're click and clack for tax and law.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna be the good looking brother and you're gonna be the bad looking brother. Just kidding. Yeah, I even listened to Click and Clack on NPR. I'm that much of an NPR junkie. I think the only thing that I was hoping to hit on, I know you touched on a little bit, but we haven't had too many questions about it, Jack, other than, hey, we're thinking about it as BGW. But there seems to be two ends of the spectrum in terms of vaccination philosophy. And I'm, in an extremely non-political answer, one end of the spectrum is, look, my kids cannot go to school without the polio vaccine, the mumps, whatever it is, they have to be vaccinated. And then they have to get revaccinated, I think, again at some point, because we're having to show vaccination records for college enrollments. So by default, if you went, if you went to college, you went to public school, you're vaccinated for whatever is deemed socially acceptable to be vaccinated. There's kind of been some rumblings around, some college campuses are not going to allow kids back without being vaccinated. Who knows what they'll do in the public school systems coming in the fall or next year. You have, while if you were to look to gun legislation as an example, while open carry, concealed carry is allowed, as an employer, I can say, but not at my location. Do you think, do you have any sort of speculation around if an employer says, look, you're not coming back? I guess two questions. If an employer says, look, you can't work here if you're not vaccinated, one, and then two, you could have the complete polar opposite, which is, work away. And because I didn't, this kind of gets back to the employer's liability piece, work away. I don't care what you do at this point, because social distancing has been lifted, but I don't believe in vaccination. Therefore, I did not get vaccinated. And I didn't force any, sort of clean environment in my workplace. And all of a sudden, I've got COVID outbreak and somebody dies because of my own political views or views on the subject of vaccination and pandemic. I mean, has there been kind of any sort of opining in the legal journals about either one of those two directions?
There's been a lot of opinion, and it's from a lot of different sources and a lot of different angles. So if you were to put kind of like the topic right in the middle in a bubble, and then all the things that are pinging at it to try to, get their opinions into the bubble, trying to penetrate into the inside of this circle, you have issues. So run down the list. So it is a matter of privacy. The privacy advocates are saying, well, we don't go around walking around with cards that say that, I don't have AIDS, I don't have this, I don't have that, or I've been vaccinated for this or that. So why now are we opening up this to an invasion of privacy as to whether or not someone is vaccinated or not, or has had COVID or not, and those kind of things. So you have the privacy issue. You have the issue of personal preference as far as should it be required for you to inject yourself with something that, and the caveat of that is that it's not proven. I mean, all of these things, all of us that have gotten injected are basically lab rats in the scheme of things. Yeah, there's been some testing, but if you have any familiarity on how pharmaceutical testing works, it's a lengthy period of time, and they took this period of time and shrunk it down to this. Okay, and so they're like, okay, and I don't want to, be nonchalant about it, because I'm hopeful and blessed, I think, that there was this possible solution to deal with this epidemic, that we don't know what the impacts are going to be short-term and long-term on our bodies. So we're all taking risk in getting this, and there's some people who don't want to take that risk, and so we're imposing upon them a rule of law that isn't your body fundamental, isn't that a fundamental right to control your body? And then you get into the whole, abortion and anti-abortion and all those things. So that's, the health side of things. And then you get into, okay, well, what about public safety? If there's an ability to protect others by getting this, and it's proven, then, isn't it our social and humanitarian responsibility to provide as much a safe environment as possible when we are requiring our kids to go to school? It's required that they, get through high school in all states, essentially, with some exceptions. And so you have all of these different people with different aspects, different rights, and saying, okay, yes, we have to do it. No, we can't do it. And so it will be interesting, going back to your question about the workplace, as to what can be required, because then you get into discrimination. issues as to, are we now discriminating against a class of people based on whether or not they've been inoculated, vaccinated or not, and that therefore depriving them of opportunities to work. And so it's just, not just one can of worms, many can of worms, with a lot of different perspectives. So that's the challenge that we have ahead of us as a society in deciding this. And then whatever decision is made, then the after effect of it, so that in your example, Adam, that an employer says, I don't care. I'm not gonna, even if I'm required to, I'm not gonna ask people if they, to show me their vaccination card. And so what liabilities does that impose upon an employer for not acting reasonably if that is deemed to be a reasonable action by an employer to protect its employees and its customers? So, and what I've just discussed over the last few minutes is just scratching the surface of the issues. There's so many sub issues. So I think it's going to be a real challenge to, in either direction. There's going to be, in imposing some sort of requirement, and then the issue of private versus public. It's like, okay, I have a business. I get to choose, as long as it's not discriminatory, who gets to come into my business. And so, there's those issues too, is that, are you depriving people of their right to own and use private property for their own purposes by imposing these restrictions on them? So a lot of issues to wade through in order to get whatever solution is the right solution for schools, universities, workplaces.
Yeah. So what, when you first started talking about, the rapid speed at which we developed this, the closest thing, I don't know enough about mumps and measles when they came out, but I looked at polio, and polio, from the point that Salk invented the vaccine that we all got, which was, late 1952, they started a trial with kids in 1953. In children's vaccination camps were going throughout the entire United States in early 1955. So that just gives you kind of an equivalent time period whereby, we as a country had said all kids are going to get a polio vaccine effectively before they can be in school, to prevent any future outbreaks. So I hope they do something in terms of a guidance standpoint, because it is really tough to be an employer and know what's the right thing to do, without it getting politicized.
And then you have different segments of society too. So having a teenage daughter, I'm thinking, she's going to make her own decision, an informed decision. I know what I want her to do. My wife knows what she wants her to do, but ultimately it's her decision. But okay, do I have a responsibility as a parent to be more investigative with respect to her ability to have children down the road, since she's a young adult? So you get into those things too, and that's just another group of young adult advocates who are saying, well, you can't force people to do this because of the unknowns, and what may be okay for someone who is, has had children, they're not going to have any more children, whatever it may be. So that I've seen discussion about those issues too in relation to that.
I know. And so what I find, again, I didn't mean to turn this debate. So if everybody else is tuned out at this point, that's the whole point of comparing it to polio, because, in 1955, we had the same exact issue of vaccinating a whole bunch of kids with a brand new vaccine that you have no idea on whether or not they could have kids in the future. Now, I don't know anything more about the technology or anything like that, but it's still fundamentally the same issue, which is we're going to jab a whole bunch of kids without effectively knowing the outcomes, because this hasn't been out for a while and we haven't had the opportunity to have long-term tests. So it's just, I don't know. It's funny. It's funny in that it's not funny. So
As if running a business wasn't hard enough,
I know.
right? I mean,
I didn't need this on my list of things to worry about.
yeah, it makes being a CPA seem pretty mundane compared to all this, but
Yeah,
we love working with privately held businesses and their owners. So this is part of it. And we've all been there too. So we do have a couple more questions that have come in here. Apologize if
sure.
you've already addressed it as I logged in late, but I'm having trouble finding out if our about our forgiveness status. Phone calls, emails get me nowhere. Any suggestions? And I'm assuming that is to the bank.
Yeah, there's not anything better because I don't think you have the ability to call the SBA directly to check your loan forgiveness status. So I think you're stuck with where you're at. What I would say is that if you've already submitted it and you hit within your window, remember that there is a requirement that they give you a decision, I believe, within 60 days. So, I'm assuming that you're still within that 60-day window.
Yeah, not to burst any bubbles that haven't been bursted, but there's discussion about that. It just is logistically not impossible, but improbable for the SBA to meet that 60-day deadline. And so there are groups that are saying, okay, you need to implement the infrastructure to keep your promise, essentially. The other is that my suggestion is just stalking level inquiries. And just flood people, flood the email, flood your banker's phone number. Maybe you can get your banker's cell phone number. So, I mean, that's just squeaky wheel sometimes just gets the oil, unfortunately, in this instance. But that's, there's no portal or anywhere really that you can check on those things.
Just keep in mind that you want your banker also on your side and advocating for you, and you're looking for a line of credit increase. So don't be too much of a pain. Be present, but be careful. All right, next question.
Use nice words, even though if you do it a lot.
That's right. If you are required to make a top-heavy contribution to your requirement or your retirement plan for your employees for 2020, and you make contributions now in 2021 before filing your 1120S, may you deduct that top-heavy contribution on your 2020 taxes? Good question.
Yeah, we got it. We got it. We got a tax question. Yeah. So basically, with any retirement contributions, it's one of the few things that as a cash basis taxpayer, you can go and accrue the contribution value and take the deduction. So, live example, if you go through and you run all your data and you find that you have to contribute, 10 grand to all your employees, in January of 2021, you find out that information, you paid in March of 2021, you can still take the deduction for 2020 as an accrual.
All right.
And we have a lot of clients that extend just for that reason, just to find out a final answer so they can take the deduction in the year that it was incurred. It's one of the only accrual items you can still take a cash basis deduction for.
So Susan, you got your money's worth on that one. every dime.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up to almost noon. Hard to believe, but any last questions before Magnum PI jumps into his cool convertible? He did have a convertible, didn't he?
It was T-tops.
Oh, it's T-tops. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. A Ferrari.
Ultimate, like, what was that all about? You got to store them. You got to take them off. If you run into rain, you got to stop and find them, and hopefully don't drop them.
I got to tell you though, last week we have a client that did a partial sale of the company, and part of the use of the proceeds, he bought a brand new Lamborghini. We went out to dinner and he let me drive on the way back, and that was freaking awesome.
Oh yeah. That would be fun.
What you find is that there's a lot of, like, all of a sudden all these cars kept on coming up on me as I was driving, and I looked over and they're all taking pictures. I'm like, well, that's really weird. Because I'm so good looking. No, I'm just kidding. Because I was driving
It was
Lamborghini.
the Magnum PI shirt and the hair blowing in the wind.
Yeah, it was really fun to drive. And then I thought, you know, if I'd seen me, but from my car, I would have thought, idiot. Bought a Lamborghini.
Or midlife crisis.
Yeah, or compensating for something like that joke could keep on running forever. When behind the wheel, I understood.
But here's a word to the wise. Don't use PPP funds to go buy a Lambo. We've got case studies that are already, they've established precedent. It's not going to be good.
Right. Right.
But what if you're in an exotic car business, though?
Oh, boy. Not good.
Of course. Well, and per Adam's example before, if it makes common sense, it's probably not legal.
Right. Right.
So, all right. We will put this recording up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon for anybody that dialed in late. And tell your friends and neighbors, and come back again and have some more tax questions for us, and maybe even some law questions for Jack. But hopefully we'll have some more clarity. Hopefully North Carolina will actually have the Senate engage and finish this thing up, you know, about 2 months too late, but nonetheless, better late than never, I suppose. Thanks for joining us. Adam, Jack, tell Magnum PI hey for us. You guys have
give me some more advance notice on theme days, and I'll play along too.
We're just making it up as we go, man. You just
you want to be Higgins or TC next time.
I like flying.
What was the other guy's name? Was it Rick? Was the other guy's name? It was the helicopter pilot.
I think TC was a helicopter pilot. So
TC was a helicopter pilot. Then they had the other guy, Rick, I think was his name, but I can't remember for sure.
He owned the bar, right? Maybe I want to be a bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could do Dukes of Hazzard, you know, continuing on the car theme. So,
yeah, Bone Luke.
We need to find a Daisy Duke then too, right? See that.
And I'm not putting on a wig.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Gary,
you guys have a good one.
For it. See ya. Bye.
Bye.